All right, thank you so much for joining us today, Leda.
My pleasure.
And I'm really looking forward to hearing about your reflections on this organization that's been around for about 25 years. So from the top, and what discipline did you earn your doctorate?
In psychology, although I was a biology major as an undergraduate.
And this was both at Harvard University, I believe?
Yes.
And when did you begin thinking about human behavior from the evolutionary perspective, and what or who prompted you to do so?
When I was 15 or 16, and strangely enough, B.F. Skinner and Walden too.
Is that right?
I read that a couple times, and the equipotentiality assumption, the assumption that any stimulus can be paired equally easy with any response, the whole book was based on that. And I kept thinking, that can't be right. That just can't be right. It didn't make sense. More formally, I mean, I think in between my freshman and sophomore years, I always thought that you should pursue human nature from some sort of biological perspective, but it was between my freshman and sophomore years that I started to I was reading that summer some ethology, human ethology. I was reading some Conrad Lorenz and some Ardrey, and I thought, this is really interesting. And then I needed to figure out what to do in terms of majoring in something. And I really didn't know what to do because while I'm glad people do neurons and hormones, that wasn't for me. It just wasn't the right level of explanation for me. And so I didn't know what to major in because I had to declare a major.
Mm-hmm.
And so our freshman week, we had these talks from different people, and one of them was Ed Wilson with the Ant Societies. And so I thought, I'll go talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to talk to him. I made a point with him, and he was about 5 minutes late, which was really key to my future, because the flyleaf of sociobiology, which had just come out, was on his bulletin board. And I read it, and it was saying, well, but this is about why things are the way they are, why animals behave they do, and including humans. And I thought, that's it.
Wow.
That's what I wanted to know. And so when he came, I said, okay, Professor Wilson, this sociobiology thing, that's what I want to study. I want to study that. And what should I major in? What should I do? And he said, well, get your evolutionary biology early, and then you can do that or psychology in graduate school. And that's what I did.
Wow.
So.
Speaking of meeting and talking with someone at Harvard, my former PhD advisor, David Buss, tells a story about how he was in his office, and I don't know if you were an undergrad or a grad student.
I was a grad student.
Came in, and you told him this was how evolutionary psychology was going to be. Is there truth to this story?
Kind of, yeah. Not exactly. I wanted to know who he was and what was going on because, strangely enough, I was teaching a sophomore tutorial. I don't know if David knows this part of it, but and one of my students, it's hard to actually switch sophomore tutorials, and one of my students went to a lot of trouble to switch, and he claimed because he claimed it was because of the evolutionary stuff, because there was a lot of evolutionary stuff. It wasn't just that in my sophomore tutorial. Although he later confessed to me that he just said that because it would allow him to switch, and really it's because the other sophomore tutorial involved music cognition. But anyway, the next year he had taken David's course, and he loved it. The same undergraduate loved David's course, and I was wondering, well, who is this David Buss? I didn't know there was somebody in my own department who was interested in evolutionary things, and why does this guy like it so much when David says it? And so I was just curious, and so I just went to talk to David and find out what was going on. So,
Wow.
Yeah, he may exaggerate a little bit, but it's kind of, I don't know. I wanted to know what was going on, and I wanted to know why didn't I know him, because I had been there a long time. I'd been an undergraduate and a graduate student, and there was Irv DeVore had the Simian Seminar
Yes,
at Harvard, which
heard
was
about
sort of
this.
like a salon,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody who was interested in evolution and behavior would come through. I mean, Maynard Smith and Dawkins and Hamilton and Trivers, just from all over the world, people would come through, and I had never met David before, and so I was kind of curious too, because how could there be a person interested in this in my own department, and I had never heard of them yet. So.
Speaking of the people you mentioned, for many early HBSers, I think it was a lonely time for them, their evolutionary journey. At Harvard, I imagine it wasn't as much for you?
It was, the Simian Seminar was like a lifeline. And so that was huge. And that was actually one of the reasons that I stayed for graduate school, also for John.
Wow.
But in my department, it was really lonely. And psychology was really, yeah, I mean, David left after a year or two. And
Sorry.
I mean, it was all very strange to people in my department, absolutely. And you know, even in the Simeon seminar, it wasn't really focused as much on proximate mechanisms or on psychology. I mean, there's a reason it's evolutionary psychology and not just human sociobiology, because in evolutionary psychology, I mean, the focus really is on what are the mechanisms of the mind that natural selection has shaped, and that wasn't as much of a focus in the evolution and behavior group. So, yeah, it was horrible in my own department.
Well, besides Irv, who were some of your key supporters during this time?
Well, certainly Irv DeVore, he was amazing. Roger Shepard at Stanford. Steve Pinker has been a kind of supporter of ours, for John's and mine, for a long time. Martin Daly, Margot Wilson, David, Irv. I think those people, I don't know what I would have done without them.
And speaking of Martin Daly, Margot, I believe a couple years later, did y'all end up at Stanford for the Center for Advanced Studies?
Yes, and David, yes.
And in some respects, it's safe to say evolutionary psychology's fundamental theories was formulated during that time period.
Oh God, I can't believe I forgot to say Don Simons.
Of course.
Don Simons was amazing to us always, and in fact, we have jobs because of Don, because Don and Nab Shagnon and Don Brown really lobbied for John to be hired at UCSB. Yeah, that was an amazing year. The year at the center. Martin slapped me around a little bit about certain things that he thought I was thinking about wrong, and he was right. That helped a lot. We had also Martin and Margot had also had a sabbatical at Harvard while John and I were undergraduates, and we had spent not undergraduates, graduate students, and we had spent a lot of time talking about these things then too, and so that was an amazing year for just pulling one's thoughts together. But we had been meeting before that. I think the first time in 1987 with Don Simons. Martin and Marco would go to the K-Rat to do their kangaroo rat work in Palm Desert. And when they would come to Southern California, the two of them and John and I and Don Simons would get together. And I remember, actually, I sometimes hear crazy things about why we called the field evolutionary psychology, like we were afraid of sociobiology. No, we thought that it had actually, really the subject matter had gone in quite a different direction, we were in a bungalow in Santa Barbara at the El Encanto Hotel and talking about this. We were also, I think this was 1987, joking that if a meteor hit that bungalow at that moment,
wow.
Most of the people in the world who were interested specifically in evolutionary psychology would have been wiped out.
Wow.
So it was a very small group to begin with.
When were you hired exactly at UCSB?
I was hired in 1991 and John in 1990.
So is it safe to say you two were essentially the Jackie Robinsons of evolutionary psych, and that you were the first people hired as out-of-the-closet evolutionary psychologists?
I think that's probably true, because David had a previous career in personality psychology. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happened was Roger Shepard. He cornered Bobby Klatsky, a very prominent member of my department, on a transcontinental plane trip from a conference back to California, and she couldn't get away. And so he was just saying, "You have to hire Leda." And so, yeah, they knew what I was up to. And hired me anyway.
You broke the evolution barrier in psychology.
Thanks to some very lovely people at Santa Barbara.
Speaking of barriers and impediments, you mentioned any notable obstacles or impediments that you recall facing as you were mounting this field?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Oh, well, publishing anything that, and getting hired, both. I mean, I spent, my dissertation research had been on social exchange, on cheater detection.
85 or so?
Yeah.
Wow. So there were several years on the market.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So that's something I didn't realize.
A long time. I mean, wow. It was also a really strange thing because, I mean, with the way I wrote my dissertation, which is online, by the way.
I've read it.
I mean, I needed to explain to my committee why one would want to take an evolutionary perspective in the first place, how it leads you to think about things very differently, how I was applying it to a particular topic, which was reasoning about social exchange, what that literature had been showing and not showing so far, and how you could get very different results, and that there were different results. So it's kind of a long dissertation, but it's long because I had to do all of those things because my committee was like, evolution, what? What's that about? They were fine about it. They liked my dissertation, as it turned out, but I didn't know that was going to happen until I went to my thesis defense. But the thing that was crazy was trying to get that work published. I mean, it's now a very, very highly
Cognition, I
cited.
believe?
Yeah,
No,
it's a
it won
highly
an
cited
award, didn't it?
Yeah, it won an award actually technically before it was published. I mean, I would send it to places and people would, for a long time, and people would know, well, people would say, well, the results are kind of interesting, but she talks about evolution in this. And sometimes they say it really, really nastily. The first time I was completely devastated because I thought science was was better than that. I didn't think it would hurt me, the source of my hypotheses. Because if I had said, oh, I had this idea while I was playing pinball, that would have been okay. But the fact that that there was a theory, there was the evolution of reciprocal altruism, was theories of the evolution of cooperation from which I was deriving predictions, seemed to be a bad thing. I thought that's what scientists are supposed to do. And I was completely shocked that was an impediment. Sometimes it would be more polite, where they'd say, well, this is all results very interesting, but we really can't have talk of psychology, evolution in our journal. And it wasn't until I sent it to Cognition, and I was worried because I had reason to think that it would not necessarily be received well there. And so I called Steve Pinker. I didn't know him very well, but I wanted to know what he thought. He was an associate editor of Cognition. I said, well, what do you think? Should I bother? And he says, no. He said, Jacques Mayleur, he really pays attention to the reviews. And I don't know who the second reviewer was, but Dan Sperber was one of the reviewers. And Dan was a strong supporter of the paper, even though there was aspects of what I was doing that he didn't agree with. But he believes, he's an amazing guy, and he believes that arguments should be conducted publicly, not by suppression of results.
Wow.
And so he was a strong advocate for the paper, and it got into Cognition. But it actually got the AAAS prize before that happened. I was in the middle of revising. I had gotten a very puzzling thing from the editor after it had been accepted, saying, here's a third review you might want to take account of in your revising. And it was a very vituperative one from some people who were very opposed. And then just the editor said, you may want to take account of this in revising. And I was too young to have any idea what all that meant. And so I was doing all kinds of replying to it and things like this. And so in the meantime, it won this prize. And then I when I sent my reply to this vituperative paper, I said, by the way, it won this prize in the meantime. And I got immediately, this was before email.
Wow.
As immediate as it can be from Paris back saying, oh, great, it's accepted, which it had already been before. So that took years. I finished that research. I mean, my dissertation was 1985. I had done the first experiments earlier, like in 1983, but it didn't come out till 1989.
If I'm being so bold, was it sent elsewhere and rejected elsewhere?
Yeah, to other places. I kept revising but I didn't know quite what to do, because if the complaint is that it's got evolution in it, what do you do with that? Because I was not going to take that out. That was the point. The point was an illustration of that this approach can be incredibly useful for generating hypotheses. That was the point. People thought I should take that out of my job talk too, and I would not. I was on the job market from, I think, 1986 till the first job I had lots of job talks.
Wow.
Which was great for the field, although anxiety-provoking for me, because the one talk that everybody comes to in a department is a job talk. Mm-hmm. And so lots of people learned about an evolutionary approach to psychology because I was on the job market for a long time. But I wasn't actually offered a job till 1990 at the University of Virginia. And that wasn't going to happen with John there. And he, in the meantime, got hired at Santa Barbara, and they were going to have positions. And so we agreed we'd go there, and I'd apply for the things the next year and see what happened. But yeah, no, people thought I should take it out of the job talk too. I was not going to take it out of the job talk. What would be the point? I don't want a job if the only reason they're hiring me is because I don't know about the evolutionary thing, because that's what I was going to do. That was the whole point. So,
This is precisely why Catherine and I wanted to do this oral history series. Is many of the new generation really don't appreciate how much of an uphill battle it was early on. And truth be told, I didn't realize that you were on the market for that many years.
oh yeah,
So this is fantastic.
a long time.
Wow.
And it's really scary when when you're getting lots of job interviews, but you're not being hired.
Yeah.
I think it's also a little weird for people if you're doing something that's really strange, but you're a man. I think you're a young Turk, and I think that if you're a woman, you're strange.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true. I just sort of have that sort of sense about it.
Gotcha. Well, was John more well received, would you say, then?
No.
Wow. So similarly.
No,
So he
that's
wasn't looked
why.
at as a
I mean,
young
I'm
Turk
saying
either?
this is why I'm saying that without Don Simon's Nap Shagnon and Don Brown, I don't know, because see, John is much weirder for anthropology than I am for psychology, right? Because
Yeah.
he's really what he's an evolutionary biologist whose species is humans who studies psychological adaptations. Where does that fit into anthropology? Nowhere. No. So he was much harder. He's a much harder case to hire, especially since postmodernism was really big at the time.
Oh, great point. Sure. We'll be interviewing John shortly, of course. Undoubtedly, that 85 paper, or I'm sorry, 89
paper, the one that should have
85
been.
dissertation, 89 paper in cognition was one of the papers that had a biggest impact on the field that you've done. I imagine the opening chapter for the adapted mind as well. What else do you think has had some of the biggest impact on the field?
Well, I do think psychological foundations of culture, the one you were just referring to, and the adapted mind as a whole. I think the adapted mind as a whole did. We worked really, really hard on that. We wanted every chapter to have a certain structure where it started with selection pressures, then it talked about psychological mechanisms, and then implications for culture, even if that hadn't been well worked out yet. And so every chapter basically went through many revisions. It's one of the most. I think we probably drove all of the authors insane, but we did that because we knew that it had to be good. Because if it came out and it was weak, it would just be another reason to dismiss the field, because that's what people have been doing for years. They've just been dismissing evolutionary approaches to anything about humans. And so we knew it had to be strong. And so people may not have agreed with particular things in it, but they saw that it was something they had to take seriously. And so I'm still happy with the adapted. I still like the adapted mind. There's going to be another a new edition of it that's going to come out.
Is that right?
It's not going to be very different. I mean, there'll be some from the editors, Jerry Barkow and John and Tooby and myself. We're going to write a little thing about it, but we wanted to preserve it as the original thing because it's the original thing that had a big effect. And I'll tell you, most of those chapters, the empirical results of them, they stand up today.
Absolutely.
I still use it in my class. I like it. I'm happy with it. I'm really happy with it.
Personalize it for a bit. So I found evolutionary psychology via David Sloan Wilson at Binghamton. I was told to go see him, and of course he told me what to read, The Adapted Mind being one of them. He then lent me his Cosmides and Tooby file where I would read their articles with his comments in the sidebar. And as a dork, I wrote, my Bible on the side of The Adapted Mind and took it to synagogue when my parents were taking me to synagogue.
Oh, that's so nice.
And I would
That's
read
sweet.
it there. So it had a transformative effect on many, I'm sure. What about papers do you think were orphaned, if you will? Do you think any papers that you thought would have a bigger impact than they have thus far?
There's one that I think, there's some work that we did with Katrine Rhoda about sort of optimal foraging, and it's basically, it was showing an alternative to prospect theory. And I think that's actually still going to have an impact. There are people who are doing very cool things with that now. But that is not, I still get frustrated when I hear economists talking about ambiguity aversion because, and this is, a lot, is really, Katrine just really rolled that out in that paper. So there's that. But the other thing is, I wouldn't say this had been orphaned, but we wrote a paper in the Journal of Personality in a volume that David Buss put together.
Uniqueness.
And our paper is, on the universality of human nature and the uniqueness of the individual, the role of adaptation and genetics. And I sort of feel that a lot of people have, they get strange things out of it, or they don't get what we intended out of it. And if I could rewrite one thing, we had to cut it a lot. It was originally much longer. And the only way that I could cut it was to take out whole sections. And now I wish I had figured out a different section to take out and had not taken out the one on neuroplasticity and adaptive targets in evolutionary psychology. Because as it turned out, a lot of people were then, the fact that there's neuroplasticity they thought was somehow contrary to there being adaptations. And we had, before anybody was saying anything like that, we had this very nice analysis of the problem of how do you build an organism given that you're scrambling the genes every single generation completely. And so I think that a lot of the stuff that's in there is really interesting, and kind of including the argument about why the evolution of why the fact of sexual recombination means that you're really going to have the genetic basis of most adaptations is going to be universal, and whether it's activated or not, you have all the genes for being female, I have all the genes for being male except for one switch. Is going to be that's a different matter, but that one I mean, it's not that nobody read it. It's just that I'm not sure people got out of it what we'd hoped.
Gotcha. I'm hoping lots of current grad students watch some of this series, particularly our interview here. Is there anything you would tell your fledgling grad student self that maybe current grad students could benefit from?
Well, my previous grad student self was completely stupid and had no idea of a professional career. I tell them they publish early and often, and don't forget to love what you're doing. That's the most important thing. But don't forget the practical things too. Oh, I really didn't know anything. I had no clue about anything that had to do with professionalism until I was a postdoc at Stanford. And I learned it from Roger Shepard and his group of people, the people there. I was.
I think the cluelessness will resonate with all of us in the grad school days. With regards to HBES itself, how did you help get HBES up and running, and when did you start attending and stuff like that?
From the beginning. Started attending from the beginning, and well, a lot of us were talking about that there should be a society that, not just evolutionary psychology, but for evolution and human behavior more generally. Martin Daly and Margot Wilson were amazing in this regard because they're great at pulling people together. You have interviews with the people involved, but a lot of us had been talking before HBES even existed. A lot of people, one of the places where a lot of evolution and behavior was happening was the University of Michigan. And, there were some differences of opinion about how to go about things between what Don Simons and John and I and some people there were thinking, but they were really classy folks. And when there were differences of opinion, they'd invite us out to talk about it. They were kind of, how often do you see that? They were prether amazing.
Was this the Darwinian psychology, evolutionary psychology kind of debate?
Yeah, that kind of debate. But there was a large group at Michigan that Richard Alexander had collected a lot of really very good people and had a program running. They were the only funded program that I know of where they could bring people out. But they were classy people, and they had and so we were talking to them. They were talking to us and to Martin and Margot, and and so it was it kind of like grew in some sense out of that in part. But I was thinking about that, and I don't remember the details of exactly the process. We were all talking about it, and then it happened, and I was on the governing board early on and so forth. But I think you need certain people who are very good at bringing people together to do that, and I think that Martin and Margot were that. Randy Nessy, Bill Irons. There were a lot of people that were grown-ups in a sense that John and I were not really grown-ups yet, and that was pretty necessary.
It's early in our interviews. My sense is that there was a dean at Michigan last name Fry, F-R-Y-E, who seemed to be integral in getting the funding to get HBES started with Randy and Bobby Lowe and Dick Alexander. Yeah. And they actually wrote a piece about how integral he was in the HBS newsletter, which I think is,
Oh, that's nice.
yeah, and I'm trying to get a hold of him as well.
Oh, good.
We'll see. But Bill Adams
Yeah, I
was
never
a
knew.
part
I
of it.
never knew how they had that. But they were well funded. It
We're
was
trying to
really
find this
nice.
out. We're getting
Yeah.
into it. So with the first HBS in 1989 at Northwestern, it's been 25 years. This is the 25th anniversary. Has there anything that's particularly surprised you about the evolution of HBS these past quarter century?
Everything. It was kind of the Wild West back then. There were lots of people interested in evolution and human behavior, but not everybody who's interested in evolution and human behavior is disciplined about how they attack that empirically. And what's happened is that there's a huge community now of people who are doing really beautiful research, and where people with careful attention to alternative hypotheses and in just exactly the way that people should. In fact, I actually find it that in evolutionary psychology, my experience is that people pay a lot more attention to alternative hypotheses than in psychology in general. So I'm just amazed by how the quality of research has just skyrocketed in the last 25 years. It's amazing. I mean, there was always some good research, but on average, it's gotten amazingly better. And I'm also surprised by how much, even though it's sort of hard to publish in general at the moment, but I'm surprised by how much easier it has been to publish research where your hypotheses are from an evolutionary point of view. It's not like it's easy to do that, but it's nothing like what it was before.
Certainly have more journal outlets than we ever had before for
That's right.
evolutionary psych. And on the alternative hypothesis front, if I recall correctly, you kind of set the tone nicely with your 89 publication, setting up alternative hypotheses that I want to say what Chang and Holyoke put forward. So what kind of directions do you think HBS will proceed in the future, or that you'd like to at least see HBS do in the future?
I don't know. I mean, there are so many things that I like about it here. Like, I like that graduate students can give talks here. There's a lot of psychological societies where graduate students almost never get a chance to give a talk, but they're the ones on the ground doing the really detailed empirical work. They should be giving the talks. I think it's a great training ground for them. I think that their research is really interesting. I would just hope it would continue on that trajectory. I think evolutionary psychology attracts some of the brightest minds in psychology, period. And I would hope that would continue, and both at HBS. I mean, HBS is great because it brings everybody together from lots of different disciplines. Other more separate meetings are good in a different way, where it's good for evolutionary people to go to the other meetings because then that introduces these ideas to a broader audience. But you need to be replenished every once in a while with people who get what you're talking about.
Yes.
Don't find it eccentric to think that the mind evolved. And
This conference is
so on.
always rejuvenating.
Yeah, exactly. I would hope it keeps going in the same way it's been going.
Last question, and it kind of gets back to how my collaborator on this project, Catherine Salmon, and I started it. It was last HBS, and we were just reflecting on people whose voices we're not going to hear anymore, including Margot Wilson, Dev Singh, Bill Hamilton, Linda Mealy, David Rowe. And I know you've had experience with some of them over the years, and do you have any fond memories you'd care to share of your experiences with them over the years?
Well, one of the things that's hardest about coming to HBES is that usually the first thing that would happen is I'd see Margot. And Margot was just this source of welcoming, happening joy. And I miss the most not seeing her when I come. We had a lot of wonderful talks with George Williams. I think that I know he's not completely unsung, but there's a certain extent to which I think he's vastly underappreciated. People appreciate him for his arguments about the gene as a unit of selection. I don't think they sufficiently appreciate the brilliance of his arguments about what counts as evidence for adaptation and looking for evidence of special design. I think that's equally important in his 1966 book. I think he was a consummate scientist and thinker, and I miss him a lot. Yeah.
Thank you so much for meeting with us. I really appreciate it, Leda.
My pleasure.
All right.